Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday edition of the Reach Films podcast. I hope you all are having a fantastic week. We've got a lot to go over today. It's been a while, at least a few weeks since I've done a live stream. So let me know in the chat how you all are doing today. I'm going to try a few new things today for the video version of the podcast. So I hope you guys like it. So let's talk about today's topic. So I got to go see Oppenheimer in 70 millimeter, 15 perf. It just so happened that a theater that is almost in walking distance from me here in downtown Fort Lauderdale happened to be one of 31 theaters in the United States that was playing Oppenheimer in 70 millimeter. So I went with my buddy, and we'll talk about that experience in a few. We're also going to talk about why I returned the Sony a6700. It was a camera that I was very much looking forward to using here in my setup with my multiple FX30s, since it has the same FX30 sensor. So we'll get into why. There's really not any one reason. It's a few things. So we'll get into that. And the last is going to be a little bit of an apology to you all. The fact that I happen to be wrong about the movie, the feature film, The Creator, in them using the FX3. Some of you may have seen, I made a video that went pretty viral very quickly, and then I got rid of it because there were some points that were brought up to me about how IMDb, a lot of people can just post stuff on there. And the short of it is, I was under the assumption that The Creator was filmed with the Sony FX3 and the Arri Alexa 65. However, it was filmed entirely on the FX3, and we're going to go over all of the information that has come out literally this week that proves that it actually was filmed on the FX3, which is kind of mind-blowing. And there's some really cool technology that they used in this movie that I think a lot of people are not using with their Sony FX3 or their FX30. So we will talk about that as well. So first, and also, I want to talk about upcoming videos, which is a new segment I want to do in the live stream, because it gives you a chance as the viewer to kind of let me know in the comments here as you're watching things that you want to see in these upcoming videos before I actually produce them. And a lot of them actually have to do with what's kind of going on with The Creator and what the kind of techniques they've used. So one of the first videos I have coming out soon is filming ProRes RAW with the Sony FX30, and what are the benefits? How do you do it? Obviously, you really only can use Atomos products right now, the Ninja V, the Ninja V Plus, and the new Ninja and Ninja Ultra. So we'll talk about that. Also, using a speed booster with the Sony FX30 when filming in ProRes RAW, because there is a micro four thirds size crop when you do film in ProRes RAW on the Sony FX30, because you're not getting 6K, you're getting 4.7K, and that's an exact crop on the sensor. So I want to do a video discussing that, if the speed booster is worth using. There's also, I've been playing around with the Sigma 50-100 a lot lately, and the Sirui 1.25x anamorphic adapter. In this camera and lens, I actually have it behind me right over here, and this lens adapter combo is fantastic. So we'll be talking about using it, whether it makes sense to just shoot full sensor, or if it makes more sense to actually shoot with RAW, speed boosted, unspeed boosted. So there'll be a lot of things on that as well. And then the last video I have coming up is actually how to edit ProRes RAW in all three of the major editors. And that's right, you can edit ProRes RAW in all three of the editors. However, there's obviously some of you asking, well, what about DaVinci? And there are some ways around it. It does involve more work, but I will go over all of that in that video. So anything you want to see about these upcoming videos, make sure to let me know in the comments below. But without further ado, let's move on to the subjects for today's video. So first, we have Oppenheimer in 70 millimeter. And this is one of the things I'm starting new on this podcast, where I'm going to interject a little bit of video with this live stream, because yes, we are live right now. So make sure, let me know in the comments how you guys are all doing today. So I'm going to play this first video, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. So here we are at the Museum of Science and Discovery, where they actually have an IMAX theater here. And it's one of 31 theaters that's showing Oppenheimer in film. Now, me and Diego over here, we're a little bit late to the party, but we wanted to see it kind of in its 70mm glory. I'll put videos in the description below on why 70mm is so important. The short of it is you're seeing it in like a 12K resolution versus seeing it in a normal IMAX, which is typically like 4K resolution digital. I don't know. What do you think? You think it's going to be anything special?
I think your girlfriend here is ready to go.
Are you priority?
Earliest popcorn I've had in my lifetime.
So we're just leaving, and it was a pretty impressive movie. You know, I went into it because it was a Chris Nolan movie, not really because I cared much about the story, and I left like really caring more about the story than about like the filmmaking. You know what happens in World War II, but like I didn't know about his story.
The politics behind it. The policy holder. He didn't get to decide what was going to happen. He was just an actor in it. And then when he realized that, I think he realized we're all the people in power. Their interest is not human life.
No.
Human power.
But regardless, it was a fantastic movie,
Incredible.
and I think everybody should see it.
And then pee once in a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, neither did I. I got to go pee really bad now, though.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
At least it's nice out, though. So yeah, so I went to go see Oppenheimer in this science museum that happened to have an IMAX in there, and they were playing it in 70mm. And I would trying to plan it out with my buddy Diego for weeks, and it was just sold out every weekend, and they kept adding more weekends. And finally, one night, the night before I called Diego, I'm like, hey, there's a few tickets left. We basically have to go tomorrow morning, like in the morning, first thing. And he's like, we were both kind of dreading it, but we went and it was packed. Like there was not a seat to be had because it's the only place in Florida that is playing it in 70mm. So without getting into spoilers off the bat, and when we get there, if we get there, we can talk about that. But seeing the film in 70mm was pretty fantastic. I, as I said in the video, I went in there because, you know, they were playing it in 70mm. It was a Christopher Nolan film. And I definitely left more interested in the story than actually the film, it being in 70mm, which was crazy. I didn't anticipate that. But the aspects of it being in 70mm, I understood right away. When you walk into the movie theater, that's in a proper IMAX, not what some people are calling Limax. When you walk into the proper IMAX and you see how big the screen is and how immersive it is, and then I'll get that into a second, but the screen is just crazy big, crazy immersive. So I understand why it's special for these theaters, because I've been in the fake IMAXs before, and you just see the difference in the screen size right away. So the screen was huge. The movie, it was like the biggest I've ever seen a film. I actually went to see Wakanda Forever in the same IMAX theater that we saw Christopher Nolan or Oppenheimer in the IMAX. And when I went to see Wakanda Forever, it was a Limax version. Like it was definitely not the same quality. You could see a great example of how great the quality was. There were certain scenes where Florence Pugh was in it, and you could see like she had a pimple on her face, and you could see it like very easily, where like those are things in a normal movie, like I'm not really paying attention to that. And no offense to Florence Pugh, it was just, I'm trying to use that as an example of like how much definition and how much detail, and it being 12K resolution, that isn't everything that's all special about it, but I think that's the only way I could kind of tell someone who's like, what's the deal with seeing it in film? What's so special about it? And it's just seeing it in its unfiltered glory was fantastic, and actually being able to see it right, see it the way Christopher Nolan intended. Now, apparently, my viewing was a little bit different than a lot of other theaters in the U.S. because some people were saying how they went into the film. They went to go see the film version of the film, and there were no previews. When I went to go see it, there actually were previews, and that's how you could easily tell the difference of the aspect ratio of Oppenheimer compared to traditional 16:9, 17:9, or CinemaScope films. We could see that in all the previews. So we did have previews in ours. But where you could tell that there was a little bit of a switchover was after the previews were done, there were a few minutes where it was complete black darkness. And they actually used that time to fill in the last few seats that were in the theater. And I could tell that that complete darkness was them switching over from the digital projector where they had all the previews for the upcoming movies to their whole, film version, film projector. And it was pretty cool. And you could tell like right away, the image was so different from what we saw in the IMAX previews. So I do want to thank the Science Museum, that had this IMAX, because I think anybody who didn't understand what the deal was that went to go see this movie at this specific IMAX, you could easily tell from going from a 4K projection to like the actual film. And even my buddy Diego, who came with me, he could immediately, he was asking me, we're sitting through the previews and he's like, what's the deal? Like, it looks normal. And then the movie came on and he's like, I see now. So it was pretty cool. Now, before we go any further, I just want to go through the comments and say what's up to all of you guys. T Davis, what is going on, man? Thank you for joining today. I hope you're doing well as well. Mr. Camera Junkie, hey everyone, how you doing, bro? Good to see you. I remember you from the good old Clubhouse days. You were in a lot of the Clubhouse rooms. We were in a lot of the Clubhouse rooms together. Karen, hello, Karen, or Corin. Sorry, I'm using a little my little MacBook Air to do my stream, so I'm sorry. It was really small on my screen. Watching it in IMAX was a pleasure. Yeah, it was. I hope you got to see it in IMAX as well, because this is one of those few films that I think you absolutely should. I worked at IMAX. IMAX films are projected in 4K regardless of the resolution it was filmed in. Yeah, no, that's what I figured. I figured that IMAX was projected in 4K, and it's why I said that in the video. But when I'm talking about the 12K resolution, I'm talking about the actual film print. When the film print of Oppenheimer is being projected on the screen, you're no longer, projecting in digital 4K from your projector. You're projecting from the film print. So that's my talk about higher than 4K. But yeah, it's very clear, when we're watching these movies, it's 4K. It's really high resolution. It still looks really great. It's just not fully taking advantage of what IMAX was originally meant to do. Also, I will say, even though this theater is, the film print is amazing. Yeah, no, it was solid. It was solid. And I will say, although this theater, it's been around for years. It's been around since I moved to South Florida, this IMAX theater. It's one of the first IMAX theaters I ever went to and forgot it existed years later. They definitely updated it, and it doesn't have the old chairs like a lot of people who are going to the film print version of Oppenheimer. A lot of people are complaining they're going into older theaters that have like old, bad chairs. So I will say the chairs were comfy in this, and I needed that to sit through 3 hours, because if I was in an uncomfortable chair, I think that really would have stunk. So I don't know if there's anything you all want to talk about with Oppenheimer. I don't know if I want to get into spoilers per se. What a cast too. Yeah. Into the video verse. What a cat. Yeah. The cast, I may go out on a limb here and say that I think this was Robert Downey Jr.'s best performance I've ever seen him do. Like, hands down. Everyone loves him as Iron Man. I get it. He killed that role, but he played a role that was, opposite to what he normally does. and I think he did a fantastic job. I think everyone did a fantastic job. But yeah, I think Robert Downey Jr. did a fantastic job. So T. Davis said he hadn't seen it. Yeah, I'm gonna try and not stick to spoilers because, as I said in the video, yeah, I do think it's RDJ's best role for sure. Yeah, you have to see it for yourself, RDJ. Yeah, if anyone's in South Florida and you happen to be in the area, they actually, after I went this past weekend, they just added a few more weekends. Because, I mean, why not? Every single time they do a showing at this Science IMAX, it just gets sold out. So I would say if you're in the area, definitely check out the Science Museum. I would say the only downside to it is because it's an old classic IMAX, there's no assigned seating. So you buy a ticket and you're fighting with everyone else to go get a seat. They do have priority, which means you basically get let into the theater early. So if you really want to get the best seats, definitely do priority. But yeah, I think if you can see this movie on projected in 70 millimeter, I would. Florence Pugh, by the way, killed it. She had a smaller role than I think a lot of people anticipated, but for her screen time, her presence is felt. Emily Blunt, always fantastic, and almost every movie I've seen her in has been, she just knocks it out of the park. And then Cillian Murphy, I think that's how you pronounce his name. You've seen him in tons of movies, seen him in tons of shows, and he finally had his, I mean, granted, he had his moment in Dunkirk, but I was way more of a fan of him, and I was way more a fan of this movie in general than Dunkirk. Just the way that they tell the story, it's not linear, and that's not a bad thing. They kind of set things up throughout the movie with non-linear storytelling to make the story more impressive. So yeah, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen the movie yet, because I think there's a lot of things in this movie that, even though you know the story of World War II, you don't really know Oppenheimer's story. And I think a lot of people had negative connotations of it because they looked at his story and they go, well, you forget that the US dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. They dropped 2 bombs in Japan. This is not something to glorify. And this story is not glorifying those events. So anyone who goes in with those opinions, it's very kind of towing the line. They talk a lot about the factual things and why they built the bomb. And it was very eye-opening because I haven't heard about a lot of this stuff since I was in school. And so it was a really good refresher, and it makes you appreciate the attentiveness of detail that they went through to make this movie. Did I miss why you returned the A6700? I just joined a couple minutes ago. No, you didn't. And I think I've spoken enough about Oppenheimer, so we will move on to the A6700 when we wrap up. If any of y'all want to talk more about Oppenheimer, we can in a few. But I wanted to talk about kind of how I had everything in order first. So let's talk about the A6700. So here's my really quick A6700 intro. Okay, I hope that was quick enough. So the A6700, boy, was that a fantastic camera. I really do like that camera. And there were a few reasons I purchased the A6700. And yes, with the title of the video, I ultimately did return it. But I want to go over why I purchased it first so you can understand why I returned it, because I haven't spoken about all of these features. So first, for anyone who's joining who happens to not know really anything about me, my name's Jeff Fagan. I'm a filmmaker, and now over the past few years, a content creator as well, not just for Reach Films, but I've worked for Grant Cardone, who's a big real estate influencer in Miami. I do currently work full-time for a company called Jazz Is, which we do a lot of jazz podcasting. There's a magazine involved. There's a lot of media properties. And so I run that company in addition to doing a lot of the content creation for them. And so one thing we do a lot that I do for Jazz Is, I did for Cardone, I also do it for a lot of realtors, is podcasting. So I was really excited to pick this camera up as a podcasting camera because it has 4K 30 that you can get out of its HDMI and not have to use a capture card. And I don't get that on the FX3. I do get 1080p out of the USB-C, but I wanted to be able to do 4K. And so that was something that the A6700 offered. And then there's a few things on here. I wrote them down right here, just so I can make sure I'm on track. So I also wanted the A6700 so I can have this hybrid camera that did a lot of these video features, but also had really good photography modes, because now I'm full in on Sony crop. I have a bunch of Sony crop lenses, and I wanted to be able to actually take photos and use a lot of the photography features, because you don't get those on the FX30. You get, a single photo, and you do get a time lapse mode, but you don't get a lot of the bracketed photography features, continuous photography. So I wanted that, even though on the A6700, I'm going to be honest, I don't think it's that much better than a lot of the A6000 series, other than color science and then the video features. But I wanted that to have. And then the other thing I wanted to have was the auto frame mode, which I've done a video on. And I wanted the auto frame mode because sometimes I'm called on the videographer side of me to go do weddings, to go film events, to actually go film speakers giving speeches. And I wanted to be able to have the A6700 as a camera that is unmanned, but gives the effect as if I had a second shooter with me. So while I'm going around, maybe on a gimbal, operating another camera, doing whatever, I would always have one camera angle that was following the subject. Now, I guess we can, with that being the last reason I got it, let's start with that reason of why I got rid of the camera and returned it. So a lot of the events, and specifically weddings that I do here in South Florida, are beach weddings, which is why when I did the overheating video, I said it a bunch of times, that overheating video was supposed to be the worst case possible scenario of that camera overheating. But I needed to see it because content creators that had the camera early were not covering the issues. A lot of content creators that had the camera early, I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers here, a lot of them are content creators. Like, all they do is content creation for a living. And that's not a bad thing. And I don't mean anything bad by saying it. But a lot of them tested the camera how they'll use the camera, and not how potentially every person would use it. So for someone like me who wanted to have it as a secondary camera for weddings to, do the auto frame and whatnot, on the beach, it just won't last. Even if the sun isn't fully on it, you're not going to get, a full length hour plus recording out of this camera in a normal 24p mode. And that became very glaringly obvious. So for the weddings and the events and all that stuff, that was reason one that I got rid of it. The next reason, which is really the only other reason, but unfortunately they both kind of tie into the overheating. The other reason was I got this to use as a 4K 30 live stream camera in a single live stream. Now, just for you all to know, I'm using the FX30 right now. I am outputting 4K, but this is going through an A10 mini. So, we're not really streaming in 4K. But I do want to be able to stream, at least output 4K into the stream, so we're getting the sharpest image possible. And that's what excited me about the A6700. But when I used it multiple times, I could not get over 50 minutes. I got 48 minutes the first time. I got 40 minutes the second time. I waited in between. It was inconsistent in the same room, but different times a day. So maybe that would have made a difference. The second time I tested it, it was during the middle of the day, even though we were here in the home studio. So I couldn't get longer than 50 minutes. And this is why that's an issue. When I'm doing a live stream, that's not just me, myself on camera. When I'm doing a live stream that's for Jazzes or whoever it may be, there's typically time before we actually go live where I have the camera on and I'm doing the audio tests. I'm making sure everyone sounds good. I'm checking the guests, seeing how they're doing. Sometimes I can take 5 minutes. Sometimes I can take 15, 20 minutes. So that time that the camera's on is going against the time. It's not like you start the stream and all of a sudden the counter starts there. So even in the worst case scenario, or the quickest case scenario, that I would do a 30-minute live stream, there's still the time before that 30 minutes and then the time after that 30 minutes where maybe we stay on with the guests we're talking to and we kind of chit chat a little bit, let them know, what the live stream is going to be turned into. Because at Jazzes, A lot of our live streams get repurposed into like short form video, into articles on the website, articles actually in the print magazine that they have. And it was very clear that I could not do that with the A6700. It just wouldn't last. And then the other thing I tried to do was do the live stream out of the HDMI, even though I can do that with the FX3. And the other thing I noticed is, when I'm doing a live stream out of the HDMI, unless it's something like this where I don't need the recording, if I'm doing a podcast recording, I tend to record internally as well. And when you're doing a live stream on the A6700, you're outputting 4K 24. If you're recording internally, you are not going to get unlimited record times. If you're not recording internally, I actually could not get the camera to overheat in 4K 24 out of the HDMI using a capture card. So there is that. But because I record internally, it just didn't work for me. So for those two big things that both kind of have to do with the overheating, it just didn't work for me. Now, just because I returned the A6700 doesn't mean that it's not going to work for you. It really depends on the kind of work you do. And I also know that a lot of you all don't live in South Florida where there's a lot of beach weddings and it's really hot most of the year. So I think the issue with the A6700 for me was the marketing was a little botched, and the people who were given the camera didn't test it for different scenarios. Like Gerald Undone is really good with doing a lot of scientific testing, but I'm going to tell you right now, in his video, the only thing that I can 100% let you know is the way he tested overheating was not scientific, because he didn't test it for all the scenarios. All the other stuff he does, he's really good at it. He's very scientific, but that test, and I'm singling him out because his is the review that sold me on the A6700, but there are other videos too. I had a really nice conversation actually with Jason Vong before I posted my overheating videos. And he told me, swore up and down, that there was not going to be any overheating. And I knew these guys weren't testing it the way that non-content creators, the videographers, were going to use this. But I was hoping I was wrong, but I was not. So, that's why I got rid of it. I don't think it's a bad camera, but I don't think it's a videographer's camera. I think this is a hybrid camera for someone who is going to shoot photography and video, or a content creator that just does not shoot long form video and you shoot in smaller clips. And the A6700 makes a lot of sense because, it's got the new FZ100 battery, or the newish, because it's not that new anymore. But these FC100 batteries last a really long time. So, that the video image quality, the photography, there's a lot going for that camera. So I think, you just have to do your research when it comes to the A6700. And if the downsides really don't affect you, then I think it's a fantastic camera. But if the downsides do affect you and you shoot primarily video like I do, then you're going to have to go with an FX3 if you're trying to stay in Sony's crop censored line. Now, that being said, I think at some point we'll probably see a ZVE10 Mark II, whatever that may be. Maybe it's not a ZVE10. Maybe they call it something else. But I can almost bet whatever that camera ends up being, it ends up being cheaper than the A6700. Probably is limited to 4K 24 and 30, but in 10-bit. And hopefully by then they solve the overheating issues. If that's the case, I'm picking one of those up immediately, especially if it's got the auto reframing and all that stuff. So yeah, that is why I sold the A6700. If you have, I don't know if I'm going to do any more content on it. I had some other videos recorded. I think the only other video I may do is how to shoot at 1/48th of a second on that camera, because I think some filmmakers may be interested in that. But other than that, I kind of think for now I'm done with that camera. But any questions you all have, if I can answer them, ask me in this video. Maybe check out some of the other videos I did, and I'm happy to answer whatever questions y'all have, because I used that camera pretty extensively for about a week and a half, and then I made the decision. I'm like, it's got to go. It just doesn't work for me. And take a quick drink here and see what you're all saying in the comments. Really glad you tested the way you did. I live in South Carolina in the warm weather most of the year. I really value that. Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. I absolutely agree. I wish that the FX30 had the, the AI processor where we could do the auto reframe, because from what I saw, I think that the auto reframe mode in the A6700 uses the clear image zoom to do it, which means that you'd ideally get better image quality doing the whole auto reframe in camera than you would by having some kind of app or something do it within your editor and taking your 4K, video and zooming in and following it and doing the same stuff. Ideally, you'd get better images doing it in camera because of the clear image zoom technology. So, that's why I'm saying a Sony ZV-E10 Mark II that did that, even if it only did, regular speed 4K, I would get it in 2 seconds. Because when I do content creation work and when I do a lot of filmmaking stuff, unless I'm doing commercials or doc work or shooting action sports, I don't really use slow motion. I'm pretty much everything I film in is in 24p. So for me, that's not really a big issue. That being said, let's move on to the creator. Now I got some photos here that I want to pull up. So let me see how I can do that with StreamYard. So give me 2 seconds. All right, I got this. I got this image here. I think I can do it now. So let's talk about the creator. And of course, as I said in the beginning of the video, I am not afraid to say when I've been wrong. And I was wrong. I believe that the creator was shot using the Alexa 65 and the FX3, and it was entirely shot on filming the FX3. So let's pull up this image right here. Here is one of the behind the scenes shots that IGN actually just put out. They put out this little vignette talking about, but they really don't talk about the FX3 at all. It's really just the behind the scenes from the creator. And let me see if I can pull some other images in here. So we got that one. Oh, nope, it's going one image at a time. So I'll have to pull out, share this tab instead. See if it pulled it. Oh, okay, I can do it like that. So there's that. You could see it's kind of dark, but it's basically an FX3 on a gimbal. Let's get some of the brighter ones here. All right, so here's another shot. It's on kind of like a crane. Then here's them going, actually looks like on kind of like a gimbal handheld set. But what's really interesting coming up, and it's why I wanted to talk about it, here is them using the FX3 with an Atomos Ninja. You can tell it's an Atomos. I know it's rigged up. It's hard. But when you zoom into the actual UI of the monitor, you can easily tell with the colors that it's an Atomos monitor. So we don't know the actual format they've filmed in yet, but with using Atomos monitors, one could infer or guess that they were filming in ProRes RAW. Maybe they just happen to be using an Atomos monitor. These are some of the things we don't know yet. But it's part of the reason I want to be doing these tests with ProRes RAW and to see how well it really works. I've been using it for a few months now, but I have yet to do any videos on it until I got really comfortable in all three editors, which now I am comfortable with it. Now I just want to film some more interesting subjects to use as B-roll before I talk about it, because I just don't want to use, pardon my French, I don't want to use bull crap B-roll. I want to get my friend Nina to come out, maybe my other friend Claire, and we could just get some shots at golden hour and just some nice beauty shots that I could use to kind of test out this ProRes RAW, because I'm still not confident enough yet to want to use it on a production until I have a lot of hours behind it, just kind of for fun. And that's one of the things I love about YouTube, is that I can do it for fun. So we have these pictures of the behind the scenes. So now we're kind of seeing, yeah, they are using the FX3. But there's also an interview that, and by the way, I have links to everything in the description below. There's links to an interview that Gareth Edwards did at Comic-Con. And Comic-Con is like, if you don't know Comic-Con, it's this really big event in San Diego every year. And it's towards people who love, film, television, movies, comics, all that stuff. And Normally, a lot of, Marvel movies, DC, Star Trek, Star Wars, they go to Comic-Con and they talk about their upcoming movies. And this year, because of the strikes, not a lot of people did, but a lot of directors did. So Gareth Edwards went and gave an interview where typically you just talk about your project, but he started talking about the FX3 and the fact that they use the FX3 because the size of the camera was much smaller than traditional cinema cameras. It's much smaller than even using a Komodo. But that's really not what they were comparing it to. They were comparing it to RELXs. But they also used it because of its ability to film in low light, which is something we're not really going to see as much on the FX30, but obviously on the FX3, that's a really big deal. Full frame, low light. It's a very low light sensitive camera. And they did that so they could have minimal lighting setups and move from location to location, setup to setup, and do it very quickly. Now, the reason I think a lot of people didn't originally think that it was shot on the FX3 was all this speculation of the FX3 was on the Go Creative show, and I believe the cinematography podcast, where Greg Fraser said that he was prepping for a movie and they were using the FX3s, and people realized, they put two and two together, that it was the creator. But then right when the creator was about to go into production, Greg actually ended up leaving the project to go work on Dune 2. Makes sense. That's a really big film. And then I think Oren Sofer, I don't remember his exact name, I'm sorry. But he went in to go fill for Greg Fraser, became the DP of the creator. And so there was a lot of people thinking maybe they could have changed things between the time Greg left and the new team came on. But it's showing that, it's pretty much the same. Gareth Edwards is talking about this in a non-filmmaking interview about the FX3. And we're seeing all this behind the scenes content using the FX3. So it's pretty apparent that they use the FX3 for this. And that brings in this new era of, I think, of confidence for a lot of users of these cameras to realize you don't necessarily have to have a cinema camera or a higher end cinema camera to make, great films. But what's more important is obviously your lighting, which has always been the key. And then also they are using expensive lenses on this movie. They're not using, still lenses. They're definitely not using like a Sigma 18-50, 24-70. They're using proper cinema glass, anamorphic glass. But you can use that glass and you could use modern lighting techniques on these, digital cameras and get really good images. You just need to know what you're doing, study your craft, kind of all the typical things, but you don't need, an RE or a Red to do that. And that's why a lot of people are excited about this. And I totally get it. So yeah, that's my spiel. I hope you guys enjoyed. That's what I wanted to talk about today. But now I want to talk to you all and know what you're feeling. So I'm going to catch up on the comments right here. But those were my thoughts on the creator. And I apologize. There were some creators who made YouTube videos on the creator before kind of a lot of this verified information came out. And they commented on my video when I came out with it, thinking that I was attacking them. And I was not attacking them. Especially a lot of them were smaller creators, bigger creators than I am, but like smaller creators. I was talking to a lot of the bigger creators who were talking about this stuff when it was unverified. But it turns out they were right. So, no harm, no foul. So let me go back into here. Preference, A67 versus FX30 regarding traveling and ergonomics. Hearing conflicting thoughts of the FX30 is a good travel camera. I mean, it's not that big. How spoiled are we these days? So let me tell you. Do I have my thing here? Let me go grab it. The FX30, here, I'll tell you in a second. The FX30 is absolutely portable. The one thing I would say about the FX30 is if you have it rigged up in a cage and whatnot, it definitely becomes a lot less portable. But the reason I got this is it's not about what's in here. There's nothing in here right now. This is my Manny pack. You may have seen it in some streams that I've been on, Josh Satin stream, but I will be doing more content in small cases like this. Now I use the a6700 in here, but I also used my FX3 stripped down, no cage. When I put it in here, I was able to have my camera in the middle, and I actually had the Sigma 18 to 50 lens and the Sony 11mm lens. Sorry, that's a notification. Let me know it's probably about the thunderstorm. Yeah, it's definitely about the thunderstorm. It looks dark outside. But I was able to fit the FX3 in this bag. I actually brought it to Disney World in this bag with to Disney World. I brought it in this bag, but I did not bring my 11mm lens. I brought my Sigma 18 to 50, and then where I had my 11mm, I actually brought my GoPro. But I think I'm belaboring the point. The FX3, if you kit it right, is almost as portable as the a6700. And there's one thing that makes it so, and it's how the a6700's eyepiece sticks out a little bit. Where it sticks out, just that area is basically almost as fat as an FX3. All the other parts of the camera are thinner than the FX3. I will totally give it that. But just where the eyepiece is, it makes it about the same. And so depending on what bag you're putting in some situations, it may take up just as much room. Again, if the FX3 is stripped down compared to a stripped down a6700. So if you're concerned that you can't travel with an FX3 and it's not as portable, I wouldn't be. It is totally portable. Again, I went to Disney World with it. Disney World. I always get confused, Disney World, Disneyland. I went to Disney World. I went to Hollywood Studios. I went to Kennedy Space Center. And I had it in this small little bag. And what's funny is this bag is so small that no one even checked it. Like, not that they needed to, but like no one checked it for anything because it was so small. And, you know, I had my camera, the lens, the GoPro. I had wireless labs in there. I had like my credit card, phone, all that stuff in a very, very small bag. So what I like about the FX3 is how small it is. Now, there are complaints about the a6700 and its size because they're saying it's basically the size of an A7C. So for a crop censored camera, it's not as small as it could be. I think there's probably various reasons for that. But for me, the FX3 is the same size as the FX3. But the difference for me is the lenses. Oh, actually, I have the Sigma lens right here. You know, I can't put a lens on an FX3 that's this small and this versatile on that camera. Like, this would basically be the size of a prime lens on the FX3. So you can absolutely get it small. You can absolutely get it portable. It comes down to what are you going to use it for? And if you're going to use it for mostly video or all video, the FX3 makes the most sense. If you're going to want to do photography and you're going to want to take advantage of the photography modes, or you're not going to do long form video recording, and maybe, you know, you maybe want the EVF because the EVF is something that I loved on that camera. It's something that made me want to keep it. And it makes me realize, you know, Sony should come out with some kind of smart EVF that goes on the smart pins on top of the camera. That's for another discussion. So yeah, it can absolutely be traveled. It's really not that big. You're totally right. I hardly use 60 frames per second yet alone, let alone 120. I'm with you. I don't use the 120 that much in this camera. And it's not even because of the crop. I just, for professional, I find myself using slow-mo, like I said, more for fun, definitely more for action sports. When I go and I film wakeboarding, my buddies, my background's actually in wakeboarding. That's what got me into filmmaking. I traveled the world filming wakeboarding professionally for like 6 years, well into my mid-20s. And that's when I shot a lot of slow motion for action sports. But then once I moved into documentary, narrative filmmaking, definitely those two more than anything, I started, you know, I basically lived 24p. You know, I just don't film that much slow motion. Occasionally there's like commercial stuff where you need slow motion here or there. And I use it, but I'm not filming in slow-mo that much. So those features, like, that's why the red Komodo worked out for me so well, because the biggest complaint with the red Komodo was like, there's not a lot of frame rates. And for me, I'm like, I live in 24p. So the Komodo was fine for me. It really worked out well. I honestly I did not honestly think that the footage from the A6700 produced better video than an action camera. The only situation I could see it as being useful for birding with a super tele. I mean, I think it's subjective. You know, an action camera, you have no shallow depth of field. So you can get better looking images on the A6700 than an action camera, but it also depends on what you are using, the camera for. If you're using the camera to do mostly vlogging stuff or situations you'd put an action camera in, well, maybe an action camera works better for your needs. And if that's the case, then you should use an action camera. I mean, to talk about your point with action cameras in the A6700, I got the GoPro and the A6700 and, the newest GoPro, the 11, which will be the 12 soon, so it won't be the newest. But I got that as like a fun camera, and the A6700 was potentially going to replace my GoPro, and it couldn't, especially because it's not waterproof. I have some videos actually coming out on the GoPro and how to maximize the most out of that camera, because there's some jailbreaking hack type stuff you can do to the GoPros now to increase the bit rate. And then there's certain things to do to the image quality, like with the white balance and more than just shooting in a flat profile, to get like the best dynamic range out of that camera. And I've been using the GoPro 11 a lot. It's pretty much been in my pocket all the time. So I do have some videos coming out on that I didn't talk about in the beginning of today's video because it wasn't really related to anything that I was going to talk about on today's live stream. But stay tuned. I have some really cool walkthroughs on how to basically get really cinematic images out of the GoPro. The only caveat is the way to get the best quality out of the GoPro is to film in 24p, which I think some of you probably knew I was getting there, because it's going to be the same bit rate filming at 24p, maxing out the bit rate, as it is in filming in 60p. You're still maxed out at 200 megabits with this jailbreak. So I rather have the most amount of information in every frame, unless I really needed the slow-mo for whatever reason. Which camera do I use for this live stream? I'm using the FX3. I'm using the FX3 because it's got a full-size HDMI, but the autofocus is pretty solid, as you can see right here. But another really big thing, which I'll show you right now, is the fact that I can output a LUT from the camera itself into the stream. So this is going to be a really quick test. Are you ready? Boom. This is what the camera looks like in log. And yeah, so that's why I use the FX3, because a lot, and by the way, the A6700 will let you do this as well, output a LUT over the HDMI. But the reason I like this is a lot of the other cameras, a lot of the other companies too, don't let you do that. So like, for instance, if you use Canon cameras, you can either output log or you can output 709. Now in the cinema cameras, and really just the C70, I think it's a little different. I think you can output a LUT out of the C70, but as far as like the R5, the R6, the R7, you can't. And that's where I want to be. I don't want to use a C70 to live stream. That's way overkill. A lot of people would use the argument, you should get the better camera to do this. And for me, like when I'm using these cameras just to live stream, I don't want to use a Red to live stream. I don't want to use this super, super high-end camera to live stream, because we're just live streaming. I do want to get a good quality camera. And that's where I believe cameras like the FX3 make a lot of sense. And that's why I ended up getting two of them, so I could do two camera live streams for some of my clients. It's just a fantastic image. So I really do like the FX3. It's a fantastic camera. And that's why I have two of them. I actually bought my second FX3 the day the A6700 was announced. And so that's why I did pick it up, because I'm like, oh, this is a fresh camera. Did I make a mistake getting a second FX3? And luckily I didn't. But that was for me. That was a me thing, and that's not an everybody thing. Thanks. I appreciate it. No, thank you. I appreciate you all for coming in here, joining me live. I've been trying to do more of these live streams. It's harder for me to do them later in the day. It's actually much easier for me to do them earlier in the day, believe it or not. But I found it's a lot easier for a lot of you all to join me later in the day. So I cleared a lot of my schedule to do this today, to be here at this time. So I do want to thank you all for joining. Would you consolidate on? So I don't know exactly what you mean. If you're asking, am I using all Sony right now for my cameras? Yeah, I still have, I think I have 2 Canon RF lenses. No, I have 4 Canon RF lenses, but I got rid of 4 Canon RF lenses too. So I've heavily reduced my Canon RF lens lineup because I don't have any Canon RF lenses right now. But I do plan on getting a red Komodo again at some point. It's more of, I like the red Komodo for me, and I like it to use on some of the gigs I have. But I saw my outlook for the rest of the year. I pretty much have the rest of my year booked already for all of my work outside of content creation. And so I knew what the rest of 2023 was going to be when I sold my Komodo. And I knew for the one time I was going to use it, at the time I could put the money elsewhere. So that's why I'm all Sony right now, because it just makes the most sense. I'm making the most money with Sony cameras right now. And I think that's kind of like the biggest thing for me. And I'm brand agnostic. I kind of go with whatever is the best tool for what I need at the time. When I bought the red Komodo, it was the best tool for what I needed at the time. There was not an FX3, nor did I have the kind of content creation work that I'm doing now when the red Komodo came out, especially because it was in the beginning of the pandemic. So there's really not a lot going on. But yeah, if that's what you're asking, if I'm all Sony right now, for the moment I am. I've got too many of these FZ100 batteries. I've actually got them all standing here. I got this one, got this blue one. I did a video on a while ago, just to test out, because it's the only battery I have that you could charge with USB-C. So I thought it was kind of cool. It works pretty well. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it over Sony batteries, but I have this kind of as my backup battery. So yeah, I think unless you all have any more questions, I think this is probably a good spot to end it. Give you guys a second, and if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast later down the line, I would like to ask, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you can, by doing that, it'll help you let you know when I go live, so you can join in on the fun, ask whatever questions you may have. I may start doing a feature where if you guys are watching the podcast later down the line and are asking some comments below, and if you have any really good questions, I'll bring them up in future episodes. Thank you. Appreciate the stream. No, thank you. Thank you again. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it, guys. I think, yeah, we will wrap it up here. Want to thank you all again for joining me on today's episode. And again, for those of you who are new here, my name's Jeff Fagan, filmmaker, content creator, all that YouTube info to let people know who you are. I really appreciate you all joining me, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Catch you later, guys.